Hi, this is Mary Esther Judy of Fallen Star Stories, and I'm really happy to be here today having a conversation with Marguerite Tonery, the author of the Kapheus series of books, the chief editor and CEO, if you will, of Tribes Press here in Galway, a small independent publishing company. And we're going to talk today about Marguerite's books in the Kapheus series, particularly the new one, Kapheus Time. So I want to just ask a general question or have a conversation around the whole creation of Kapheus, the fantastical world of light. When I'm talking to kids and when I watch authors talk to kids, the one question they always get is, where do your ideas come from? And the thing I wanted to know, Marguerite, was kind of around that, but I want to talk about the world building. You've created a really nice sense of world building, something that's not terribly unusual in the world of children's books, but this one flows really well. And that's that notion of stepping out of this mundane, ordinary, day-to-day world and going through to another world. And that's usually it comes across as the world of a dream or the world of the child's imagination. But in the Kapheus books, when they step through that portal, the drawing on Eliza's bedroom wall, it really feels like they're actually stepping into their actual real world.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that. How did that come about? What were your ideas around that?
When I was a child, so I'm from Galway City, you know that. And when I was a child, I used to go with my father to Connemara during the summer, and that was just bringing hay to Connemara. You know, he had a truck, and I used to jump into the truck. And once we crossed that boundary of Galway City, once we got into Connemara, he would open up the world of Irish mythology to me. So there he would talk about the leprechaun. Do you see that leprechaun? He'd say, and we would, as children, I'd be sitting beside my brother Michael or my brother Willie, and we'd sit and we'd look quickly to see where's the leprechaun, you know, and
Yeah.
and he'd tell us about the fairies and all the fairy forts and the fairy rings, and it's like every time we jumped into that truck to head back to Connemara, it was like I wanted to go because I wanted to see the real Irish, the Ireland of mythology. And he created that word for us. So I think it was very I think it was very important for me to create that word for children again. Do you know what I mean? So that we don't lose a part of our history, our ability to storytell. To I grew up in a family where it wasn't about reading as much as it was about storytelling. So my father used to sit us around in the evening time. We were all sit around by the fire, and he'd tell us stories. Now the majority of the time, he used to tell us stories, ghost stories about the black dog and banshee. And my mother would be going mad at him. She said, "Don't be frightened. They're dead." But he'd tell us all these mythical stories, and he'd always add an extra little bit to it. So I often think we live in this world and we function in this world, but there's so much more to the Irish. There's such a depth there. There's such a history, and everywhere we look in this country, there's history. It's there everywhere. It's there looking at us. It's looking back at us. We see the Om, the inscriptions of the Om, the original language, handed down by Ogma, the dragon, in Kapheus Earth. He handed the children language. He gave them the language of their people, their ancestors, and he was Ogma, and he called it the Om. And that's how the tradition came down. You know, we were always the Irish language was a verbal language. It wasn't a written language. It was a spoken
Mm.
language. So, and he handed this down, and they crossed the threshold between this world and the next. And it's kind of that thing. Go back to what you really are. Go back to the sense of who you are deep within. You can be anything. You can function as a particular girl or boy in this world with your this, that, and the other, depending on where you come from in society, what side of the street you were born on. But when we all come back, when we pair it back to our souls or that place deep within us, wealth, age, circumstances disappear. And this is the authentic being, and this is the person that we want all our children to be. We want them to be authentic. We want them to be who they truly are and to fulfill their dreams, not our dreams, their dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We tend to lock them into this notion as they go through the day-to-day life of, we tell them they can be anything, but there always seems to be limits on that in this world. You can be anything, but you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to accomplish.
Yeah.
Constantly accomplish. Do you think then that, or do you feel that the mythology and what happens in that other world, is that more a reality than what happens in this world?
I suppose I wanted to take the children, Eliza and Jamie, away from all of the trimmings of this world and level the playing field. And bring them into a world that talks about their emotions, or a world that teaches them to be comfortable with who they are, or a world that teaches them to have courage and resilience. Through the characters, the elves, even the fairies at times, the dragons in particular, all of these creatures that it's like, as much as possible, I wanted to create diversity and inclusivity and to level the playing field, to say we're all one, regardless. And there's an elf in it, Lug, and he's called Lug because he was originally Lu, which in Ireland is the god of light.
Right.
And this elf was the elf of light. He was the god of light. And he was sent by Grandmother Oak to the Dark One, to be the Dark One's servant. But we don't learn that until later on, that he was actually sent there. But in the first book, we're told that he was, he's down and out, like he's ulcers on his skin, they're weeping. His clothes don't even look like clothes, and more or less look like rags. And it actually took me back to a place I went to in South America. I went into this mining area in South America where they were mining precious stones, and outside near the Iguazu Falls on the Argentinian side, on the Argentine side, I should say. And the children, when I saw the children, they were little children, they were malnourished, and there was so much poverty. And when I looked at the clothes on their back, they didn't resemble clothes. They were just like something that just covered the body. Like the boys and the girls just had pretty much something to cover the body, like a rag over your body, rather than trousers or, little skirts or whatever, and it kind of struck me. It's always remained with me. And I just thought, they won't have a chance of life that I have because of their circumstances. But that doesn't mean that they aren't wonderful people. And
yeah, that's beautiful.
And Lug Lug was in this state, and he'd become the Dark One's informer and slave. And it was later on that we realized that when he's rescued from that place, almost because he's on his death's door, and his brother rescues him and brings him to the fountain of life. But we see in it that his brother never gave up on him. The gnomes came, and the gnomes are very sacred, and they said, we'll bury him. We will give him a sacred blessing. We'll bury him well. We will take care of everything. And he wouldn't give up on his brother. And they finally reached that place, and Lug was resurrected in a different sense. Like, he went into the fountain of youth, or the fountain of life, and he was washed clean. And the children realized at that moment that it's not your appearance. Don't judge a person by their appearance. Don't assume you know their background, because you never do. And it's that kind of complexity that I wanted to bring into the books.
And did it very well. There's also that message that comes around that of, not only don't judge another by their appearance and their circumstances, but don't judge yourself.
Yeah.
by your own appearance, by your own circumstances, you can work things out differently.
Yeah, and I think Eliza had huge challenges around that as a
Yes,
character and as a
yes,
girl, because it is. I know we're trying to become it's trying to be as equal a world as possible, but there's still a lot of inequalities. Male female divide is still there,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
she felt it, and almost she gave her power away to her brother at times, a power that she could have had. That was her power. She could do things. She could be what she wished. And it's not about being something. It's not about being a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist. It's about being your most authentic self and about following your journey and your destiny. And sometimes that takes enormous courage,
Oh yeah.
enormous self-belief. And
it's a real struggle
mm,
because there are so many people who want to keep you in that box. I think we see that when they are not in Kapheus, when they are in error,
yeah,
and
yeah,
their mother in particular
yeah.
expects certain things from them and don't vary from that.
Yeah, she was quite. She,
She's a formidable woman, is she?
the kids.
In not necessarily the best ways.
When I go into schools and I read a bit in the children, and children say, what they say about the mother isn't that she's a formidable woman at all. They say terrible things. They go, oh.
Go home and hug their own mothers and say, thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite funny because when you're reading in schools, a child will stand up in the middle of the story and you're reading, and the child will stand up and they say, that's not right. Jamie
Yeah.
should have said that to Eliza. That's not right. He's been very mean. And, or they say something about the mother.
Mothers aren't supposed to do that. Yeah.
Child abuse. And you're like,
children are very honest, and they say what they feel.
she said, that's cruel. That's child abuse. I remember a boy standing up. I was in a school in Dublin, and it was about 200 in the hall. And this little fella, and he stood up strongly in the middle of talking when I was reading to them.
Mm-hmm.
And he just stood straight up and he said, that's child abuse.
Just calling it like he sees it.
So had a mother.
But it is interesting with Kapheus. If we go back to this, the first book, we meet the children. They are at the youngest time that we meet them. They are young then.
Yeah.
And they walk through that drawing on the wall. And you get that real naivete and that real, wow, where are we now? And it seems like they're entering well, I don't want to say a very small world, but it's more enclosed as each book goes by, and as each book addresses different aspects of what it means to be your real self. Kapheus expands greater and greater, and it seems like their life in error begins to contract.
Yeah.
As that place gets bigger and bigger, as it addresses each different issue. And we go through all the, you've set it up very nicely with the concrete elements. You've got the earth and the air and the water and the fire. And then we get to Kapheus Spirit, which is, to me, that's a real transition book. It's clear that the children are maturing, are getting older. But when you hit that book, it's like all bets are off. You don't know where you are. You don't know what's going on. And it moves very fluidly, but it moves in a weird way, as if in a dream, which of course, as it turns out, it is. And it brings us up to Kapheus Time, which, like I said, I felt the Kapheus Spirit was a transition. And a transition from this little world, these little people, these people that were really struggling. They hit this moment in time where all bets are off. You have to decide now, or you have to follow this feeling. There's nothing else to do but just to follow what's being placed in front of you. And then Kapheus Time, boom, here we are.
Kapheus Time is kind of one of those books that you're guided, earth, air, water, fire. You're really guided. I think fire was a kind of a turning point for me as an author. I felt that I became an author in Kapheus Fire, that I could play with the characters and I could play with the story in ways that I couldn't in the earlier ones, because I needed to build my readers into the bigger story, you know. And then Kapheus Spirit was that dream. And then Kapheus Time came, and Kapheus Time was, okay, guys, Jamie's in secondary school, Eliza's transitioning into secondary school. And it's like, this is it, guys, this is it. It's make or break now. This, you can be you now, you know, you can be your own person now. You can decide what you want to do in your life, but it's bigger than that. It's a book that's about, it's about seizing your opportunities when your opportunities present themselves. It's about being able to see, I think as well, when we're children, we idolize our parents, or we idolize this or idolize that. Whereas as we get into the teenage years, we start to see our parents for their flaws, their strengths and their weaknesses. We start to see them for the people they are. And we start to see, is this the person I want to be, or do I want to be different from my parents, you know? So we start to find our own identity, and we start to figure out what we need to do.
Achieve autonomy.
Yeah. And it's a real struggle. It is a difficult one, because you have certain rules of engagement that you learned in your formative years, and all of a sudden you choose your own rules of engagement. You know, you choose what you want for your life, you know. So it's a big one for children.
One of the things I thought was really interesting about that is you can see that the children are maturing. They are growing up. They are making decisions. And while Eliza is still struggling with that, she seems to handle it a lot better than Jamie does. Jamie still seems to carry with him a lot of childhood conflicts and childhood concepts about the way things are supposed to be. That's the way I felt when I read it. Anyway.
Yeah, and I wanted to hold that, because I often see that with teenage boys as opposed to teenage girls. All of a sudden, a teenage girl can, one second she's this little girl, the next second she's a young woman.
Yeah.
And her own thoughts and emotions and views of the world, and her could be her twin brother, or her brother is only a year older than her, a year younger, or whatever, isn't there yet, you know. It can often take, I don't know, it can sometimes, we'd say, take boys an extra year or two to get to that place. But what I wanted to do with Jamie is shake him up as much as possible. And you have a choice there, Jamie.
I think you did that.
It's kind of, he had a choice: shut down or change.
Yeah.
We all have that choice. We can say, okay, this is it. This is the person I want to be in and live this life. Or we can decide we want to change and evolve with life and become more flexible. But people make that decision at different points. I know, like, people can get married and say, that's it, I'm sorted now, and never evolve beyond that point, and never want to grow and change, and they're happy, they have it, that's it. So I was giving Jamie that option: are you going to stay at this place, Jamie? But if you do, I'm going to shake you. And I shook as much as I could.
Because that's what happens in life.
It is, yeah.
You are challenged if you decide to stay as you are. You're constantly challenged. It's like life is going, are you sure that's what you want?
Yeah.
Here, what happens if this happens? Are you still sure that's what you want? The thing, I also found it really interesting that, not to give anything, I don't want to give anything away at all, but by the end of Kapheus Time, Jamie still seems to be in that area of flux. He doesn't know what he wants to be. He doesn't know which direction he's going to go, whether he's going to stay with what he knows or whether he's going to move a little bit further along. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, because it's where he needs to find that courage. He really needs to find his courage, because it's secure. What you know is, you're secure in what you know, and you don't want that to change.
Yeah. And I think that's true of all of us, really,
Yeah.
In various points in life.
These children have been through a lot. They've been through a lot in their own world, but they've been through a lot in Kapheus as well. And they're better for it. But it's been
Yes.
a lot. It's been a lot. It's been, it's been a roller coaster for them. They've had a lot to do.
Absolutely. Um, I really liked with Kapheus Time that introduction of you've got them really time traveling now.
Yeah,
They've got the armillary sphere, even though it was snuck in on Eliza in Eliza's pocket. And they're really time traveling now. And you take them to places like when they go into the cathedral, it still feels like they're entering the mythical past in a way.
yeah,
But that lovely section where they travel back to Irish history, to a turning point in Irish history. The War of Independence, the Civil War is going on, the War of Independence. And that has a different texture to it, in that it feels like they are dealing with a reality, even though there are elements of the magical in that. The young girl that they meet, she is a seer.
yeah.
It brings a really concrete nature to this notion of history, how we've traveled through history as human beings, and what you build on that, and what you can change and what you can't change. How difficult was it to write that little Irish history story in the middle of this
I think
time traveling adventure?
for me, it was the hardest piece to write. The War of Independence was the hardest
Mm,
because you're facing the reality of Irish history. And Irish
yeah,
history is fraught with civil wars, with not just civil war, but war like we had. Oh God, every country in the world tried to dominate us at some stage, I'm sure. But just the British Empire trying to take over Ireland and that resistance that was there were 800 years under British rule. And I really didn't want to bring up a political issue, because I don't like bringing up political issues if I
yeah,
can avoid them. But you can't deny your past. Um,
no,
and you have to face it, and it's a very difficult past. Ireland's past, the War of Independence, was a very difficult time, and a lot of children lost their lives during that War of Independence. And they're often not spoken of, they got caught in the crossfire, and it was a cruel, cruel war. Um, and it is our history, and I didn't like writing it. I didn't like it. I found it very difficult to write that piece. But I had to be honest with myself, and I had to be honest with my reader. This is us. This is who we are. This is our past, our recent past. And so, yeah, I placed that in, but I gave Jamie a really big scene there. It was a really growing up moment. It was Jamie became a man in a few seconds, really, of reading, but he became a man in that scene. There was something that grew inside, that opened up inside him. He left his childhood behind. He stood there and he witnessed something that he will never forget and that will shape the rest of his life. And that connection he had with the child, the seer, Nora, the connection he had with her, and just to see how, I don't want to give the game away now, but just the dramatic turn of events that took place, that he was a witness to it and powerless in it, because he couldn't change history. He couldn't take her out of that situation and her family out of that situation, put them on a dragon's back and bring them to future Ireland or future era. He had to witness it and walk away completely helpless. And I think it's the hardest part for any of us, if we can't do something, if we can't physically do something to help people. And he grew up, it was traumatic, but it was kind of like he became a man, I thought. And that piece, there's a huge growing up piece in that.
yeah.
That went by Eliza. It didn't really hit Eliza the way it hit Jamie, that passed Eliza by. And we have huge growing up moments for Eliza, like in Kapheus Fire, when she has to walk away from her brother and leave him to his addiction to power. But this was his big moment. He stood there and witnessed something dramatic and that he could not change. So it was a big growing up moment, and I needed a big growing up moment for Jamie. I wanted one for him. He deserved it. He's a long time
Yeah, yeah. He's
knocking on the door.
worked so hard.
And
um,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I think Dara as well, the dragon Dara. There was a moment in there where he found it very difficult. He changed to be he became a human in Era, and they put him into a cassock, the priest's clothing,
Yes.
and they were all, father, father, father. My friend is dying. Could you say the last rites? Could you give the last rites? And that affected him hugely, because I'm not, just because I have these clothes on doesn't mean that I'm not X, Y, or Z, and that kind of affected him. And then Satanta had a huge moment as well.
Oh, that was, yes.
That really shook him to his core. And if we only had those moments in our lives, if we could only go to the future at times and say, oh, don't walk this path.
Yeah, that would be wisdom. That would be real wisdom. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we can't. We have to live with what we do and
So
face those moments. It takes real courage to face those moments when that, I think, and it's been said that that's what actual courage is. That's what bravery is being absolutely terrified, not knowing what to do, but facing it anyway.
Yeah, that's it. And that's what the whole of the Kapheus series is about.
Yeah.
All of it. It's just keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep facing your fears, be courageous. It's all of that. That's all it is. It's the whole series about that. But they grow older and they learn so much about themselves and about each other. I think it's a good series for children. I think it gives them a kind of a pathway. This is how you navigate your way through these years of your life.
Yeah.
And I think they can tap into it, go back to it at any time in their lives, and they get a sense of, yeah, I can do this. I think it gives them that. I hope it gives them that.
Oh, I think it does. I think you've done that. The movement throughout the entire series has been that one of encouraging. I know it's scary. I know it's awful. I know you're going through terrible things, but keep going. You can do this. And it gives them a map, as you were saying. It guides them.
I think with Kapheus Time, I really tried to confuse them.
I don't know. I like I said, that was the moment for me after reading Kapheus Spirit and then into Kapheus Time straight away. It is the very moment that she has woken up from that dream.
Yeah.
And boom, here it is. This is your life. You're still young. There's still a lot of variables, but this is your life now. And to handle that with maturity, it gives them that navigation, that sense of time, of what time does, of what you can do in and with time and what you cannot.
And be careful.
When it comes up to the end of the book, again, I'm not going to give anything away. The thing that I like, and I love this, I love books with open endings. Because on the one hand, it has very nicely closed a certain part of the cycle. That's done now.
Yeah.
But what comes after, we don't really know. It's that moment of grieving for everything that has gone before and lost, but waking up and going, this is where we are. And you're thinking, like, as I'm closing the book, I'm thinking, what are they going to do now? Well, the answer to that is whatever they choose to do. And where does it go from here? Do you feel like there may be more to the Kapheus series? Or a different direction for the Kapheus series?
I always thought I'd bring them to college. I get them to college.
Get them out into the world.
Fine, then they look fine.
You're
Um,
on your own.
I think Kapheus Time is a book that you could end the series on, well,
Mhm.
and it would make no difference. Like, it would be fine to end it there. But I am curious about what happens to them next. I'm addicted to writing.
I
Um,
guess I guess you'll have to wait and see if they approach you and say,
I am
we're
curious.
not quite done with our story yet.
And what I take from Kapheus Time, when it came to an end, I went, oh my goodness, these children, they're wonderful. They've achieved so much, and from the very,
More than most people do in an entire lifetime. Yeah.
and there was just such a dominant character, a character that domineered their every movement, that dominated
Mm.
everything. We're moving on from that character, even though that character was controlling and domineering, and they're now moving on
Yeah.
from that character. And it's like, how are you with that? And how do you move on from that? How do you, when you've had such an upbringing with quite a dominant person in
Yeah.
your life, how do you,
How do you become who you really are?
yeah,
Yeah.
without their
And it's yeah, like I said, it has that open-ended feeling to it. At the same time as having a feeling of completion. So the one thing that I always, I've had people say to me for years, oh, I hate open endings. They want to know what happens. And I'm like, I say to them, what happens next is what you think happens next.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm dying to find out.
We'll have to wait and see. They may come and talk to you and tell you.
It's going to be, yeah, because
Well, I have to tell you, thus far, we'll say thus far, I've loved it, every minute of it. From the bits that can be taken as pure fantasy, but the stuff bubbles up inside of it that makes it feel more real than the real world. And watching them grow and change and see what happens. And a lot of the time in reading the book, I felt like I was right there with them. Like Jamie or Eliza or somebody was going to turn to me and go, oh, Mary, you need to do this. I need you to take this and go and get that elf or speak to that fairy.
yeah.
And it affected me in the way that a lot of my favorite childhood books affected me.
Oh, that's
It had the same effect for me that The Secret Garden had. So I have thus far loved every single minute of it.
well. I'm delighted to hear that, and it's wonderful. When I started this journey, I was very naive, and I was very nervous, and I walked into Dubray Bookshop in Shop Street in Galway, and I handed my book to a person called Marguerite Judy, and I said, what's the chance of this book being on the bookshelf? Could I get it onto the shelf? I was like, I was that naive, and you took a chance on it. You were the first person to take a chance on the Kapheus series, and I'm very grateful for that.
Oh,
And
thank you. It was a pleasure.
I
Um,
loved it all.
I clearly remember that moment. And you handing me this book, and I did say, well, let me have a read of it. And I went home and I read the whole thing that night, and I walked back in, and the manager was there, and I held up and I said, this is a yes. It's fantastic. And he said, okay, whatever you want, go ahead, go for it.
So it's been a fantastic journey. I've been very lucky. Dubray in Galway, Charlie Burns, Kenny's Bookshop, and three big names in even Irish bookshops and are in Galway. We're very lucky, and all three accepted it, and I've been very lucky with it, and to stand. What makes it for me, the Kapheus series for me, is to be able to get fan letters. I get fan letters and children like, they love it. This is their world. Or
That's fabulous.
our children walk up to me on the street and they're saying hi, and I'm like, hi, how are you? It's good to see you. I don't know how they know me or where I met them because I've met so many children, but they remember. They remember Kapheus series. They
Mm.
remember. They want to meet me. They want to talk to me. And before we end the interview or this chat, I want to just tell you a quick story about me being in Dunnes Stores. So I went into Dunnes Stores. My local Dunnes Stores is on the Headford Road in Galway. So I walked into Dunnes Stores and had the basket in my hand, and I was standing at the ice cream, looking in at the ice creams because I was like, might like a nice ice. And looking at the ice creams, and then there's this boy in his football boots, and his knees were grazed and short pants. He's just after coming from training, and his two sisters were after coming from training, but they had their tracksuits on, they had their runners on. They looked neater, you know, and they were like,
Okay.
I was tagging along with them, you know, but they were trying to be very sophisticated. So the three of them, all of a sudden, I was there at my looking in, and the three of them were staring at me, and I was like, hi, and then they were still staring there, and they didn't say hi, and so I said, this is kind of strange. So I left the ice creams because I said, now this is bad influence, so I better not be buying ice creams because their mammy might be buying them ice creams. So I leave the ice creams alone. I walk around the shop. They followed me around the whole shop. But they still didn't tell me. They didn't say anything to me. And I said, hi, how are you? And all the time I was looking around to find a parent, a mother or a father, and not one in sight. And in the end, after about 3 or 4 minutes, and I was trying to walk around and do things, they said, we read your books. And I said, oh, you did? And which ones did you read? And they told me all about them and different things. And they loved Full Blood Little Pink Dragon. And the sister was saying, I'm giving them to my brother. You know, she was handing them down to him. What are you going to do in the next story? So they wanted the kind of an update of what's going to happen next. And I couldn't give anything away. And I was telling them, well, we'll have to wait and see and whatever else. And so then the brother was starting to follow me around, and the sister said, come on, come on, come on. And in the end of it all, I couldn't get rid of the three children. So I said, the only way to get rid of them would be, because I was getting nervous now. Do you know the way you get nervous because child
Yeah.
issues?
Yeah.
And here I am, three children, and they're not mine.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah.
So I walked up to the very top of the aisle where all of the people are, the shopping baskets and shopping trolleys, where all the cashiers are. And I said, okay, he or she, the mother or father, has to be, or granny or granddad or whoever it is, has to be down here somewhere. I've been walking around the shop now for about 5 or 6 minutes, and I can't find a parent to claim them, you know? So
Yeah.
I walked down around, passed down and passed down. Does anybody know who these, I'm like the Pied Piper. Does anybody know who these three children belong to? And I'm walking and I keep my mouth shut and saying nothing, and they're delighted. They're skipping behind me because they've been talking all about Kapheus, and they're delighted with themselves. And the next thing, this mother turns and she gives me the most foul look.
Oh no.
I was like, so I just said, I'm not even going to try and explain myself. So I'm going to
No.
walking past the woman, and what are you doing with that woman? And she's the author of the Kapheus series. So it went from her thinking that I was harassing her children or something to she turned to don't be following her around the shop.
Oh no.
God, she's not going to attack me first. Moments like that where you have children following you around because they want to know everything, or they've read the Kapheus series, and it's moments like that you think, oh my God, these books are actually having an impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And to know that the books are having an impact on children and adults' lives even as well. Because there are a lot of grannies who buy the books for their grandchildren. They come back and they buy the books all over again because they want to have their set and keep forever. And the grandchildren, they can have the next set, you know?
Yeah.
They started reading them and they want to keep them. But I've been very lucky. It's kind of, I don't know what to think. Sometimes I'm in awe of children because they're in awe of me.
Yeah.
It's like it's having an effect, and it's great to be in that space with
That is the highest compliment I think you could get. That's how you know
Yeah.
that they're a success.
And please God, now we'll keep going forward from here.
Absolutely. From strength to strength, Marguerite. Well, listen, thank you very much for chatting with me. I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Thanks very much.
Maybe not on Zoom, or maybe on Zoom. That's the way the world's going now.
Thank you very much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you about maybe the next book.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Marguerite.